Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about micromanagement. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, would you say that you are a micromanager? And if so, how do you feel about being one? Well, I feel pretty good about it. Because I think I found a pretty good balance between micromanagement and being hands off, or whatever we call it. Let me explain it a little bit. So, one of the things that I have said on many occasions, and I will preach that probably for quite some time, is that when you're dealing with a manager or a tech lead or whoever who has no technical experience and doesn't actually lead, they only manage, you are basically betting on that every software developer or you're offloading the responsibility of leadership to the team, which is a problem because you can't guarantee that they will be any more capable of leading than you are. And in my world, the ideal manager, tech lead, we'll call it what you want, should be an individual who sort of has the competency to hold that role. As I've said before, guys, at least for me, I won't follow a general into war who's never seen combat. I don't care what their credentials are. The reason being because when you are leading, when you're actually leading and not just managing people, you usually have something to contribute to the group. A manager doesn't have that whatsoever. You can literally hire a junior level software developer to be a manager because it boils down to facilitation of people. That's not leadership. And that's the difference. So a micromanager, or someone who thinks that they are capable of leadership and so forth, has to have one thing in order to do that well, otherwise they're just annoying to everybody else, and that is the experience and maturity to understand when they should be involved on more granular things and when they should just back off and let the developers or whoever do what they do best, because this is not something that really requires any micromanagement. I'll give you a concrete example. So when I work with the software development teams that I work with, usually, I won't check every pull request or things like that because I trust that they know what they're doing. Just as I trust that, if they want to take an hour early or later, or like they want to be a bit flexible with their times, I trust them. I don't have to go and check them all the time because I know that they are good people. But I also get to know them well enough to know where they're not so good. An example would be many of the developers that I work with are very good at saying that, say, classic one is unit testing. They're very good at saying that they're going to do unit testing, but then they'd end up not doing it because they forget by the end of their story. So in this scenario, I know, and this is a little bit in a sense to be like being a parent, I know them well enough to know that this is something that they have a weakness. There's a weakness here, and me getting angry with them or being upset and so forth isn't really going to, well, it might help and so forth, but there are more creative ways, I argue, to solve that problem. So what I like to do, for example, is that I will go into the code, and for every class, or every, like, especially the important stuff, and say controllers, if it's backend and things like that, or call it what you want, right? I will create a unit test that pulls out and instantiates the object that they're dealing with and uses reflection or something similar to pull out all the methods or method names of the class, and then it will run that against a hard-coded list of all the methods that we have right now, and it will check that each of those methods have a unit test. So whenever they add a new method, or they update the name or change anything like that, that test will fail if they don't actually add a test for, like, the new method they added or the thing that they did and so forth and so forth. And some of them think that's a little bit annoying, of course, and I go, yeah, absolutely. And you can remove that the second I can guarantee me that you won't forget. It's the same thing when I tell them we will. Like, I had that discussion the other day where I said to a coworker, I was talking to my team, and I said, so I've noticed that basically we're not seeing an improvement in regressions. because in the specific system we have a lot of problems with regressions, and I know for a fact that they have gotten accustomed to a way of working with where the QA basically does all the testing. They don't do any validation themselves. They don't practice. It's really, it's throw it over the wall type of stuff, right? And I said the thing that we were going to do to fix that is that we were going to introduce a coverage. And I said, okay, what does that mean? Well, it means that you are going to put a threshold wherever it is right now, and doesn't matter if it's 1%, 0%, 100%, I don't care. Just put a threshold and say that this is the minimum now, like that checks the coverage, and then I want you to evaluate that number every week. And here's the requirement: it has to be version controlled. And they go, okay, why? Because I'm going to check that number. There are no requirements on you that you don't have to do bullshit tests that you don't care about or anything like that just to get the coverage up, because it's not about getting the number as high as possible. It's about you making a commitment to improving in this area, and me having the ability to go and check if you're actually doing that. And then when I see that, well, you've shipped 30 stories and not a single time did you write in a unit test, I want to ask you why. And then you explain it to me. If you have a good reason, then we're all good. If you don't have a good reason, then I will point my finger and say, remember what we said, this is important. And this is the sort of stuff that I will do as if you can call it micromanagement if you want, guys, but the thing that is happening is I will argue that it's less about micromanaging every detail of somebody's workflow. It's more about figuring out what guardrails I have to put in place, what checks and balances are necessary to change a behavior that a software developer has in the way that they do something that actually isn't it's actually causing problems, basically. It's the same thing when you have uncommitted software developers who don't really they don't really have a good domain knowledge, or they don't really care about the project, or they're apathetic and so forth. There are all these types of little tricks that you can use in order to breed that behavior into the group by just having an opinion about certain things. It's the same thing I do with large-scale stuff when we deal with one of the reasons why I love monorepos, for example, is because when you're dealing with a siloed dynamic in a company, you can fix that very quickly by just putting everybody in the same repo. It is a little bit more complicated than that, but what happens is that you can build a community around the software and create consistency between teams and create, as I call it, the neighbor problem, where everybody has their own application, but now they have neighbors, so that means that they sort of have to align a little bit at the very least and be a little bit more democratic when they want to do wild changes and things like that, which some think is very annoying, but for the company it's usually very efficient, and it helps more than it hurts the person who thinks that they should be able to do whatever the hell they want. So what I want you to take away from this is that, yeah, I would say that to a certain degree I can micromanage, but as I'd like to think at the very least that the times that I do that, it's not usually it's not about being annoying. I don't have a strong opinion about single quotes, double quotes, like I usually tell people and they ask me, oh, which linter should I use? I'm just pick one. Pick anything, literally just make it a standard so everybody agrees on it. I don't care which one it is. Just do your thing right. The thing I have an opinion on is when I see that we are lacking in some area, because usually when you are a manager, tech lead, product manager, whatever, I've had all of these two sort of roles. Ultimately, my primary responsibility and goal is to safeguard the quality of the system. So if we have a lot of regression problems, or we have a lot of issues in some area, these are things that I have to fix, because if they were possible to fix by just the software developers, they would already fix them. That's where leadership comes in, and that's where you should draw a bit on your own experience and a little bit of human understanding if you have that, to put things in place so that you actually get those consistent results. I like to tell my team that the way that I try to structure every software team that I work with is so that, this is not my quote, but I love this quote, the master branch should protect itself from bad code. What that basically means is, and these are my words, when I work with a software team, it should not matter if it's a junior or a senior who's working on that software. The only thing that should differ is how fast do they complete their task. But the code quality and the work practices and so forth should be so well designed that the overall end result is still at the same sort of level, regardless of if it's a super master software developer who's working on it or if it's a junior. Have a great day.